Okay, and we come to the end of our journey at Pluto, the furthest planet out in our solar system. This brings the whole question of whether Pluto is a planet or not. A few years back, it was declassified by astronomers and is no longer considered to be a planet. It's called a planetoid or something. Well, I think it's still a planet, whatever that means. It's worthy of being considered a planet in terms of what we see with Pluto in astrology is it has serious power. It is the archetype of power and depth and intensity. Now, if you want to know more about the whole story of whether Pluto's a planet or not, I recommend Mike Brown's book, How I Killed Pluto and Why It Had It Coming. He's an astronomer. He's the main astronomer who's responsible for Pluto being declassified, and in some ways, he's really done a number for astrologers here. But I really respect and understand why Pluto is declassified scientifically, but astrologically, we still definitely see signs that it's out there and a part of the human psyche on some level. I basically think that Pluto, it's part of that whole territory in deep space of our solar system called the Kuiper Belt, where all kinds of objects are out there that are similar in size to Pluto, actually. But it's the one object in the Kuiper Belt that's kind of like the emissary and well-known, famous individual from that territory. So it represents that part of our solar system, and so you can think of it as the part of the solar system and the part of us that is deep and profound, and Pluto has to do with the underworld. And so in the sense that Pluto's way out there, it's kind of like the furthest reaches of the underworld in our solar system. And it represents that which is repressed, that which is considered shadow in the human psyche. Pluto is the descent into the underworld, but it is also the phoenix rising from the ashes. Pluto has a lot to do with death and rebirth, the journey of transformation and evolution. It is the very process of evolution at work, from the Big Bang to the birth of stars, to the birth of planets, to the birth of life, to the birth of human consciousness, and the evolution of that consciousness. That's all Pluto. It's the life force, the Shakti power that's coursing through the whole universe and compelling it to evolve and transform over time, as well as Pluto is that force which transforms an acorn into an oak tree. And it's the force that transforms us from a single-celled sperm or egg into a fully formed adult human being. And so Pluto has a lot to do with nature and animals and biology. Pluto and Neptune are one of the great dialectics in astrology. Pluto is more nature and Neptune is more spirit. Pluto biology, Neptune is more the ephemeral or the imaginal or the sacred. Pluto the underworld, Neptune more the heavenly. And so Pluto is just crucial for living a balanced life in many ways. Questions to ask yourself in terms of understanding whether Pluto is well integrated for you or not. One would be, am I living life to the fullest? Am I living life passionately? Am I surrendering to the life force that wants to move through me and help me become who I am meant to be in my fullest realized form? Pluto is that animal life force that wants to move through us. Pluto, like all the gods, is an archetype that must be surrendered to. We must learn to surrender to Pluto and let it move through us, just as we must surrender to Venus and let it move through us, as we must surrender to the lunar consciousness and let it move through us. With Pluto, a good example is Martin Luther King Jr., who was born with the sun opposite Pluto. The sun is that hero archetype, and Pluto is power. And so Pluto's sun can be the powerful hero, the empowered hero. And Martin Luther King here in the United States was at the crosshairs of history where a powerful force of history was moving through him. The force that wanted to evolve the situation here in the United States from the way it was with extremes of racism and apartheid type situation, and transform it into something more noble. And he had to deal with very powerful energies, the powerful forces of our Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, that was tracking him, and the Southern racists that were out to destroy him, as well as the positive forces of history that were moving through his life and supporting him and helping him to come into power. And yet it was a very intense journey for Martin Luther King. And in order for him to handle it, the intensity of those powers that were coming through his life, and his life was in danger in many ways, he had to integrate other energies to balance out the Pluto. And so Neptune is crucial for balancing Pluto. In King's case, he had this moment where there had been death threats on his life. It's called the kitchen table experience, and it was very real that he could die, his family could die. There was a bomb placed at his home, and there was an evening at midnight one night where you answered the phone and it was yet another death threat, and he was considering throwing in the towel and giving up, and in order to protect himself and his family. And in order to continue as a leader in the civil rights movement, he had to surrender and trust that there was some larger spiritual force, Neptune, that was containing him and supporting him as he struggled with all of the intense, dangerous forces of the universe. And Pluto is the wild forces of nature, the destructive powers. Pluto is all the destroyer gods of different traditions: Shiva, Kali, Dionysus, and Pele, the volcano god. Pluto is the power of a hurricane or the power of a tsunami, the destructive powers of nature that are way beyond the individual human's ability to withstand. And so King was in one of those situations in history where it was like a tsunami was barreling down towards him, or he was trying to ride the tsunami. And in order to do so, he had to turn his life over to a higher power, which is what he did at that kitchen table in the 1950s. He had to basically say, God, I cannot worry about this anymore. There's no way I'm going to lose my mind if I'm constantly worrying about these dangerous forces that are out to get me. I have to just trust that you're going to protect me and my family, and I'm just going to turn it over. That's a Neptunian process in order to deal with Pluto, the more difficult side of Pluto, which is the very real dangers that are part of this Earth. Pluto is the Darwinian struggle to survive. And Pluto is the very real survival of the fittest situation, where if you're not careful, there are dangers out there. And so I think we have to be connected on other channels, Neptune especially, in order to deal with some of the challenges of Pluto. Other things that Pluto relates to, Pluto, again, it has a lot to do with nature and remembering that we are part of nature, that we're connected to nature, that we are animals and are in relationship with the natural world. And so one way to honor Pluto is to connect with your own nature, with your own biology, to connect with a pet, or to go out into nature in some way, go camping or hiking, is always a good way of returning home to Pluto. The other big part of Pluto is, the shadow work, going into your own personal underworld. Pluto has a lot to do with catharsis and repression. Pluto is how we control and repress. And so we have to go into our own underworld where we've repressed things and allow those energies to cathartically be expressed. And when we do so, we free up the energy that had to be used to hold things down, and we learn to live life more passionately. And so Pluto has a lot to do with the cathartic transformational work that is sometimes necessary to clear the blocked energies of the psyche. Of course, there's many different shadow forms of Pluto: power moves, control moves, the acting out of sexual shadow material. There's lots of gnarly stuff that Pluto can be. Pluto is Kali, and the devouring feminine, as well as the destructive masculine. Pluto is at work in all warfare and all violence. And so there's lots more that could be said about the challenges of Pluto, but ultimately Pluto is the gift for living life in an empowered way, coming into your power as a human being in a positive sense, and learning how to work with your power in a good way. I sometimes think of Stan Lee, the comic book artist, who's born with a really strong Pluto. He has Sun Pluto and then some other major Pluto aspects. He's, of course, famous for creating all these superheroes. And Stan Lee's superheroes like Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk and the X-Men, these are individuals that wake up to the awareness that they have powers and the journey to using those powers well. And this is the Pluto journey. So I think I'm going to end there, and there's always more to be explored, which we will do in your reading. I'm going to record one more video to kind of summarize and integrate all these different discussions on the 10 planetary archetypes, and I'll conclude. So thanks for watching this.